In this video, I'm going to talk about how to transition your construction documents into presentation drawings. Now, this one is still going to be rather basic and isn't going to take this drawing set from the technical into the highly polished and photorealistic, but we are going to add some details to give it a little bit of personality and to convey some design intent. So we're going to talk about Entourage that we've added, scale figures and textures, and then I'm going to give you a preview about the next level of rendering that you might get into in a later class. So since you've seen this last, I have made a couple of changes. I have toned down the value of the tile on the front of the bar because it was getting a little bit distracting on the back wall. And because I'm a fan of pattern, I did not want to eliminate it altogether, but I did want to just lighten it a bit so that I could see all of the entourage that I added in. So entourage is really just the little objects that give this space personality and that also give a hint about some of the things that we're going to have to accommodate in our design. So you can see here, I've added a series of coffee making equipment. And so you can see I've traced those here. And now you understand the importance of having those outlets at that counter height because these objects would be plugged in. Now, I didn't plug cords in or, show cords being plugged in, but it does indicate to you why they are there and the importance of having outlets at that height. I've also added some very simple menu boards above so that people can see what items are available. Now, these are really straightforward frames. The reason I did that was because the pattern on my walls is rather complex, and so I didn't want to overdo it. And I've also added some stuff inside this cooler, and it's kind of scribbly and loose because I've been doing this for so long. It's really hard for me to stay precise. I tend to go real scribbly and sketchy when I don't have a T-square in my hand. But it's just like little objects and snacks and maybe wraps and muffins and things like that. But again, just very subtly indicated. You can also see here that I have added a view out the window, and I did that by rendering on the back of my vellum so that it would give priority to the fact that these are windows and it wouldn't impose upon the two parallel lines that are indicating that there's a glass or glazing there. I could have also done that to this cooler here, but I just wanted to really focus on it for the windows and allow it good visibility for the objects that were in there in the cooler. Other than that, there's very little entourage through the rest of the space, just because, again, I was trying not to overdo it, but just to give enough information about the things that we needed to accommodate. Now I'd like to talk to you about scale figures. Now, scale figures can be very sketchy. They can be photorealistic. They can be more blurred. For our purposes, they're black. Now, if we were a little bit more skilled in Photoshop, or if we had purchased a set of grayscale markers, I would have probably done these in a very light gray. Sometimes a real black scale figure sort of reads like just a black hole that draws your eye directly to it, and they're a little bit too dark. But I didn't want us to have to purchase a bunch of markers just to render 3 little scale figures, so we've done these in black. But moving along, there's some really excellent versions of scale figures that can add a lot of personality to your scene if they're done right. Now, notice my scale figures are placed in such a way that they show the size of the space, but they're not imposing or overlapping on really important information. We have somebody sitting and somebody standing, and then somebody standing behind the bar acting as a barista. Now, students often are not great at drawing scale figures simply because they have not practiced it. But the more you do it, the better you get, and there's a lot of resources available to you to draw scale figures. But as a result of being uncomfortable drawing them, a lot of times students will only put one or two, but really you want several scale figures. And if they can be, transparent or, not take away from the scene, having many of them is wonderful because it makes your space feel very popular. And a client likes to know and see on a subliminal level that their space works well and people would like to spend time in it. So there's sort of an aspirational component to incorporating scale figures as well. But the thing about this elevation that, in my opinion, really brings it to a level of presentation quality is the textures. Now, I've added textures to all of the surfaces. I've added them to the back walls in the restroom, the bar front, and the back of the bar or the back of the cafe. I have also added a little bit of stippling, and that's the little dots. I've applied stippling to all of the pendant lights and the sconces, the shades of the sconces, and you can see that even the side views of the sconces on either side have it. This little shape right here is the side view of the exit sign that you would still see where the sconce doesn't overlap it, in case you're wondering. But back to textures, you can see I added a little bit of texture to the benches here and the banquette back here. I didn't add wood texture to the front of the banquette because wood texture can be really distracting with all the legs of this furniture, so I just left it blank. But the textures really give it a sense of materiality and a little bit of detail. And you can see here, I was thinking about light coming in through the windows over here on this wall. And so you can see that the textures are concentrated to respond to the difference between light and dark. So it's a little bit darker on the left edge and a little bit lighter on the right edge. And then same thing here with the pendant lights. So the next step, if you were taking a presentation techniques class part 2, for example, what we would probably do next is get some of our grayscale markers and bring in some shadows over here on the left sides of objects, bringing in some shadows on the sides of the lights, the shades, and really starting to pull in and pop out the three-dimensionality of these objects, really kind of getting in there and showing how these cushions curve, the shadow underneath the banquette. And then we would come in with, with a white pencil and come in with some real bright highlights and really kind of pop out the sides of the objects that are exposed to a lot of light. But the key to good design is knowing when to stop. And so in this case, for our purposes, this really is still a construction document set. And these are still technical drawings. So there's really just the bare minimum presentation techniques added in here. And then to do any more than that at this stage would require markers, a larger scaled up drawing, and would really require us to get into the technicality of rendering, which is really fun to practice, but is outside the scope of this class. But at the very least, I hope that you can see this section now that it has been brought into a presentation quality, and you can notice the very careful placement of entourage objects throughout the space to give a sense of what might be needed, functionally in the space. You see how some scale figures are bringing life to the space and then also conveying the general size. And then you're also seeing how the importance of textures can really enrich a scene and give a sense of the materiality.